So today we are here with our friends at Environment Washington who spent all summer collecting petition signatures, talking to people about the real crisis that our orcas are facing. Sadly, we lost 3 more orcas this summer. The population continues to go down, and the number one reason is that there's not enough food for these orcas to eat. The best thing that we can do for these orcas to ensure that they have the food that they need tomorrow and into the future is remove the 4 dams on the lower Snake River. And the folks at Environment Washington spent all summer talking to people all over the region about the importance of removing these dams, restoring this river, and saving our orcas.
Just how damaging are these 4 dams for salmon?
The leading orca researchers in the region have said that if we don't remove these 4 dams, it may be impossible to recover southern resident orcas. The reason is the potential for restoration if we remove these dams is huge. There's hardly any other project out there that would result in 1 million more adult salmon coming back to the Columbia River every single year. Removing these 4 dams does that for us. These fish that are returning to the Snake River also are some of the biggest salmon that are out there, and it's because they have the furthest to travel. They go from the ocean all the way to central Idaho for spawning. So it's a big bang for the orca's buck when they come across the Snake River salmon.
Okay, do you think the Army Corps of Engineers is doing enough in evaluating how damaging these dams are?
No. The Army Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies have significantly shortened the public comment period and the review timeline for the ongoing environmental impact statement that they're doing. Essentially, the Trump administration is trying to cut out the public, trying to cut out science, and we know that the process that we're on right now is set up for failure. So we're really looking for our members of Congress to step up, show their leadership, and come up with an actual plan that will solve this salmon crisis, save our orcas, and restore the lower Snake River.
So what are you hoping that this petition does?
I think the biggest thing that we need to tell our elected officials is that this is a crisis. We need to respond with a greater sense of urgency, and we can't keep delaying action and conversations. We need to have a concrete plan put into place tomorrow so that we can start removing these dams, that we can invest in communities so that we're not leaving anyone out high and dry. But it is well past time that we have this conversation and that we seriously look at dam removal.
So Rob, speaking of leaving people out high and dry, when you remove those dams, there's going to be a lot of areas that are high and dry now that'll end up being underwater. How does the plan compensate for that?
So most of the area that's going to be exposed is currently underwater by the current reservoir, so we'll actually have a lot more land exposed. And there's a ton of opportunity there for riparian forest restoration, more hunting and fishing opportunities. Some of the areas downstream will see a little bit more flooding because the river will be allowed to flow back naturally. But these dams were not put in for flood control. They were primarily put in for moving agricultural products. And the amount of ag products that we are putting on the lower Snake River has been steadily declining for decades.
So since salmon generally need that sort of more shallow floodplain area to thrive, how would the removal of the dams help with that?
So a lot of the Chinook salmon that used to return to the Snake River prior to the dams going in, they were spawning in the main stem of that river in the shallow areas along the shorelines there. The dams and the reservoirs that are created behind there completely flooded that habitat. So they lost access to spawning grounds in the main stem. It also prevents salmon from reaching the other spawning grounds in central Idaho. That is some of the best remaining salmon habitat that we have left in the lower 48. It's expected to remain resilient and cold even in the face of climate change. So that's really where we should be putting our investments when we're looking at salmon recovery, the places that will be resilient over the long run.
Are there estimates on how much the Chinook population could bounce back if this happens?
So researchers at the Fish Passage Center, which is a collaborative research effort between federal, state, and tribal agencies, estimates that with some operational changes such as increasing spill and the removal of the 4 lower Snake River dams, we could see 1 million more Chinook salmon coming back to the mouth of the Columbia River every single year. There's hardly any other action that we could take today that would have that big of a benefit.
What's to keep the sea lions from eating them rather than the orcas?
So sea lions are a natural predator. They're a native predator, and it is this noise.
Perfect timing.
I was over there. So sea lion predation has been a concern for orca and salmon recovery.
You can start again.
Okay. So sea lion predation on salmon has been a concern for a lot of orca advocates, but sea lions are a native and natural predator. There's still going to be an impact there, but the biggest thing that these salmon need is access to habitat. If we remove these dams and give them access to the free-flowing river and the spawning grounds that they need, they are so resilient and they're able to go through a host of different challenges. That's the main thing we need to do.
By taking away these dams, is it going to affect the agriculture on the east side with canals and everything?
The biggest challenge that our east side friends are going to face if these dams go away is moving their products from eastern Washington to ports like Portland, where they can send it out overseas. However, there are a lot of options to replace those services. There are investments that we can make in rail infrastructure so that folks can still have access to getting their goods to Portland. We don't necessarily have to put them on a boat. And then with changing market dynamics and the trade war that's ongoing, fewer and fewer of our products in Eastern Washington are going overseas. We're actually sending a lot more of our products to the Midwest and Chicago than we are to Portland now.
So it's not going to affect any kind of irrigation for farmers?
There will be some irrigation impacts. Most of that is further down where the Snake and the Columbia River come to confluence with each other. But it's just basically extending a couple of pipes so that you can access where the river is now as opposed to where it was.
What do you tell people who have no idea what you're wanting to do? It's like you take away the dam, you're going to take away the power or other things.
So there are a ton of communities out there that do depend on the services that these dams provide today. There's no question about that. But it's not the dam that they rely on, it's the services. And we can replace that with investments in rail instead of barging, investments in solar and wind instead of hydropower. There's so many other ways that we can meet our needs and keep our communities whole and functioning and healthy. We just don't have to have a dam that is killing salmon and orcas to do that.
So if the Army Corps of Engineers wants to take this down, it's going to take how long and how much money and how much red tape?
There's a lot of different discussions and debates about timeline and how much money it's going to take. One of the most immediate things, though, that we think Congress can do and authorize is starting to breach the dams. There are earthen portions of these dams that hold back the river. Taking a couple backhoes there and removing that earthen portion will open up access for a lot of salmon. So we can do this relatively quickly, but we do have to start putting plans in place so that services can be replaced, communities are allowed to transition, but we have to act with a greater sense of urgency.
And what do you hope that this petition does?
I think that this petition is sending a very clear message to our elected officials that Washingtonians care about our southern resident orcas, we care about our salmon, and that we are eager to find a bold solution for the entire region. This isn't just about the 4 lower Snake River dams. This is about protecting the entire Northwest. Salmon and orcas define this place, and if we lose those, then we are a much emptier place as a result.
And then, so over the course of the summer, all of these undergrad and grad students have been collecting thousands of signatures.
Yeah.
How
And
many?
I'll let them talk to the exact numbers that they hit on, but I think 15,000 petitions collected. It's amazing. And canvassing is a hard job. I got my start going door to door talking to people about politics. That's not an easy thing to do. So the work that these students have done over the course of this summer has been absolutely phenomenal. It's difficult work, but it is so important to moving the needle on this issue and saving our orcas.
That's all I need.
My name is Lindsay, Lyndsay, and my last name is Levitt, Levitt. And I'm the lead field manager for the Environment Washington.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And are you still in school somewhere? Are you part of that group, or you're?
No, actually, I just graduated from the University of New Mexico in Intercultural Communication.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So tell us, you've been out knocking on doors and talking to people.
Yes.
What's the message been to them?
We're really just trying to mobilize the public as much as we can to have, the public's voice being heard and to talk about these issues that are happening with the orcas. With the news last week, with 3 orcas presumed dead, there's only 73 left right now, which is the lowest number that it's been in 34 years. So it's a really urgent issue, and we've just been trying to get everyone to, speak their voice and say everything that they feel strongly about the issue.
How many people do you think you talked to while you were out there?
I believe I have talked to 13 1,300 people.
What's your sense that they're in agreement or in alignment with you?
I think the overwhelming majority of people that I've talked to in canvassing have been super supportive of this issue. I think Washingtonians across the state have just really, really shown us that they care so deeply about these magical creatures, and they want to see the orcas remain in the Puget Sound for years and years to come. I know that I would love my kids and grandkids to be able to one day see the orcas, and I think that the overwhelming majority of Washingtonians agree that they want the orcas to be a strong part of our Washington community.
Well, and on the other side of that, do they really seem to understand what a loss it would be and have a sense of that if they were to go away?
Yes, I think that a lot of people are fearing that the orcas are going to become extinct because they are so critically endangered right now. I think a lot of people are aware of how critical this issue is, and it was also a really amazing experience to talk to people who didn't know that much about it with Environment Washington, and just raise awareness about the issue, and just really, like I said, mobilize the public and get people thinking about how urgent this issue is.
Well, and I want you to convey to us the similar message that you conveyed to those folks. What would it mean if we lost those orcas?
I think that the orcas are just a critical part of the Washington community, and I think it would be really devastating for the entire ecosystem in the Puget Sound, and it would be really devastating to have a creature that has been, part of the Washington culture and community to be gone forever. I think it would be really tragic to have any species be gone, and since the orcas are such a foundation of our culture in Washington, I think it would be devastating, and I think a lot of people agree.
All right, Lindsay, thanks for that. Really appreciate it, and good luck with your continued efforts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Nick Schmidt, NICKSCHMITT. Any title? I am a Save the Orca campaign leader with Environment Washington.
All right, very good. So tell us about some of your activities over the last few months here. What have you been doing?
Yeah, well, I have been personally knocking on doors, engaging the public in grassroots activism in order to remove the Lower Snake River dams and hopefully save one of Washington's most iconic species, the southern resident orcas.
So as you've met these people, have they had any common questions or concerns? When you get to a large enough number, you're going to start seeing some repetition, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. One of the main concerns people have with removing the dams is the fact that they are hydroelectric dams. We have in Washington committed to a 100% renewable energy grid, and hydroelectric dams like this that were built a long time ago no longer meet the standard to be called renewable energy anymore, and the power that we get from them will need to be replaced eventually anyhow. So yeah, that's a really common one.
How about in terms of the orcas themselves? What are folks saying to you?
A lot of people don't really understand the ecological significance of orcas, or they don't understand how letting the orcas go extinct would be bad for humans. Yeah, most people just love orcas. That's the bottom line. That's why we are successful with this. We know that people identify with orcas, and really they're a species that resonate with a lot of people. They're highly intelligent and just beautiful creatures.
So
yeah.
For those that don't know, Nick, what do you tell them?
Yeah, that don't know how important.
That don't know how important they are ecologically to us.
Yeah, I try to explain to them in the most simple terms that they are an apex predator, and that they are responsible for keeping in check a lot of the lower food chain interactions that are important. They are pretty much the only apex predator in Puget Sound, and losing them could cause dysbiosis of the whole ecology. So,
Geez, what would happen if we threw that sound ecology out of balance, do you think?
I mean...
What's your thought?
My thought would be that it would mean, a lot of our industry, a lot of our commerce, a lot of travel, a lot of tourism would suffer because of that. Personally, I would just be sad that, one of the most iconic species that we have in Washington is gone, and that future generations wouldn't be able to enjoy that anymore.
Well, and if we lose one of those, the term is apex predator.
Yeah.
I mean, are we concerned that other species would then begin to multiply out of control and take over the sound?
That is another concern, but it's not just that they would multiply out of control and take over the sound. It's that they don't have anything else to keep their populations in check. They don't have a proper way of regulating that balance. It's not just that one species is going to become the new apex predator or anything. It's that every other interaction that takes place is not going to be well balanced.
All right.
Sorry.
Nick, thanks for sharing that knowledge with us. We really appreciate it, and best of luck.
Thank you. Is that it?